This is wool from Oxford sheep, Oxford Downs,
Ah,
which we've never done
I was reading
before.
it.
Yeah, I was very excited to be. I was surprised and pleased with this yarn in a way I didn't expect. I didn't know what to expect. I had never knit with this before, but I imagined it to be more coarse than it was, and it's actually really, really nice Oxford. And Oxford can be more coarse, and several people mentioned, I think Melanie was talking about having experience with it, and that she was surprised when she found out it was Oxford because it seemed pretty nice. But so and after our discussion the other night, I went back because who was it that said, oh, it was Susan that had information saying it was like a rare breed. And so I went back to look at that, and this sheep has a very interesting history. So it has been at different times very popular and very rare. So the numbers of this breed go up and down all the time, and I'll get into that a little later, but that kind of answers the point that Susan brought up the other night about it being in her book. It was on the conservancy list, but some of the sources I had looked at, it wasn't on any of those kinds of lists. And while some sites are not as up to date as others, I think I got kind of a good idea of where the breed is at as of this moment. But starting at the beginning with a kind of general description, the Oxford, this is an Oxford, it's a down breed. It's the largest of the English down breeds. So it's of British origins, and it's the second heaviest of all the British sheep breeds. The word down in this case isn't really a reference to the softness of the coat. Down breeds are breeds that are raised in low country in England and the hillsides of the south part of England. So down in this case literally means geographically down in England. And they do graze on pasture lands and kind of closer to the oceans and in the more fertile, wet parts of the southern part of England. So the British Hill breeds are actually included in this category due to the similarity of their fleece characteristics. And that's why I said, Cynthia, that the Chivia is a good guess, because the characteristics of the fleece are very similar to the Oxford and other down breeds. The Oxford is a short wool breed with white on its body and dark wool on the face and lower legs. They were developed to graze on the lush hill pastures or downs of southern England and selectively bred to produce meat and wool from abundant amounts of grass. As a result, they do not thrive in conditions offering sparse feed and minimal management, though they are a rugged sheep and they do tolerate harsh climates. Other down breeds include the Hampshire, the Shropshire, and the South Down, among others. Prior to 1900, Oxfords were very large, blocky animals. Not a stretch, like to say that they are built like a brick house. They are a breed that is known for growing quickly and well-muscled bodies, use are heavy milk producers, and provide for their young very well. So the kind of goal of raising this breed is to get lambs that grow very quickly into large animals with lots of muscle that can be, butchered basically for young lamb production. And secondly, for their heavy fleeces, although they are short, that kind of fleece can be commercially marketed very well. So before 1900, this was just an enormous size animal. Some of them weighing over 400 pounds, which is, you know, the size of a cow. You know, a push in the 1930s for a more compact animal produced a more modern version of Oxford that is a bit smaller but maintains other characteristics of the old breed. They are a large, robust, powerful animal with a bold head, a strong, large neck, and a poll, or the top of their head, well covered with fluffy wool and kind of a top knot. I'm going to start sharing photos. Let's see. Okay, so this is a photograph. Let's see. This is an etching, a steel plate etching of kind of an early Oxford down sheep. There it is. You can see it's just an enormous animal. If you look at the size of its legs compared to the size of its body, it looks like a big balloon. And the facial characteristics are, like I said, it has the fluffy top knot, no horns. This is a ram. And then let's see if I can bring up a picture. I can't remember now if I have the equal. I don't know if I have a steel plate of the ewe, but here's an early photograph as well. So this would have been, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s. And you can see that this is this one is kind of dark colored, and I'll go into that a little bit later on the fleece colors. But that's what they look like. Now the modern.
Strangely, that engraving was not so far off.
No, exactly. Very, very close. Here's a picture of a modern, like literally from the fair, Oxford. And you can see, look how cute. And you can see the legs are dark, but they're woolly, not those sleek kind of hair covered legs, but a dark, fluffy wool. A little bit of gray wool on the head, mixed around the cheeks and stuff. And just a very, very dense, short, fluffy coat. Okay, I'll leave that one up for a little while. Let me see. The color of the legs are more variable. That can be several shades of brown or gray, and also black. The breed is also known for its very hard feet that need minimal attention. And this is a common trait in breeds that exist in more lush, wetter environments. They literally, it's literally survival of the fittest based on your feet in some cases. Like Romneys have good hard feet that are resistant to foot rot, because as I've said a couple of times, a sick sheep is a dead sheep, basically, and infected feet can quickly spread into a much larger issue with not just sheep, but other animals. But sheep in particular are very susceptible to foot rot and problems that extend beyond that. You know, they are an animal that spend their, you know, probably 90% of their life on their feet. So it's really important that they have healthy feet that are well acclimated to the environment that they live in. And so over time, some part of the selective, characteristics that end up in a breed are related to their feet. They produce the heaviest fleece of any down breed at 8 to 12 pounds of resilient, medium grade white wool that is compact, free of black fiber, and has a good staple length. Actually, take that with a grain of salt. I'm going to talk about staple length later, but it shears into a valuable commercial fleece of it's really medium staple, light shrinking yarn, which is commonly used for hosiery, knitting yarns, felting, and, kind of items that you wouldn't wear next to your skin, blankets and outerwear sweaters and things like that. The conformation, meaning the standard that the breeders associations like to see in the Oxford is a large, and I love this word, stylish. And this came up in from several different sources, both the United States associations and associations overseas as well, that is a large, stylish animal and long-bodied with heavy muscling qualities, especially through the rear quarters. The legs are short and dark colored, standing square and well apart. The whole body is covered with wool of a close texture, good length, and medium quality. The meat is firm, lean, and of excellent quality. The large lean lambs, which are produced, allow larger joints with a great depth of lean meat to be prepared. In terms of temperament, the Oxford is quiet, docile, easy to manage, and walks with a bold, alert movement and head held high. I just love when the breed standards, which are like the standards espoused by the associations all around the breed, are using words that are very emotional like that. They're kind of imbuing the sheep with human qualities that they may or may not actually feel. Anyway, the Oxford thrives equally well on both arable and grassland, meaning farmland and pastures. So actual farm fields, they in many places they can feed their animals by letting them loose on croplands that have been harvested already, and there's plenty of plant matter left that can feed the animals, which is a really interesting second use of your croplands. And in every climate, requiring smaller quantities of finishing feed than almost any other breed. Finishing feed being usually pellets and commercial feed that they give to animals near the end, near when they're getting them ready to go to market, so that they it's usually really high quality, high protein, and adds a little more lean muscle to the animal just before they go to market. Although some breeds, meaning other breeds, appear to thrive only in certain locations, Oxfords flourish everywhere and have been exported to nearly every country in the world. Oxfords have historically been one of the most important terminal sire breeds, used as the final cross on commercial ewes to produce fast-growing market meat lambs. The breed enjoys modest popularity throughout the world, especially in the UK, where they are once again increasing in numbers after being rare for some time. The Oxford has seen varying popularity in the United States, where currently it is kind of overtaken by the Suffolk breed, although research has shown that Oxfords excel as the sire of market lambs, and the breed's overall profitability may be second to none. So that's kind of a interesting and confusing conundrum, is why do people why do farmers gravitate to other breeds when they have this breed that's exactly what they might want? And that's just, who knows why. The purebred Oxford Down Ewe is healthy, easily managed, docile, and has good mothering ability. Ewes produced single or twin lambs, and partly due to size, the ewes are relatively easy to lamb unassisted. They will naturally mate early in the season, making for early lamb production, and the purebred lamb will thrive with, because they have such a good wool cover. The early birth, the birthing early in the year is works okay with them, because they can keep themselves warm and they have good birth weight. And along with, they have a strong instinct to suckle. The purebred Oxford Down Ewe today has two principal functions: the breeding of rams for crossing onto other breeds, and for offspring to be used for prime market lamb, and to produce more purebred Oxford lambs to be sold as prime lamb on premium markets. Okay, so Oxfords were developed initially in the 1930s in Oxford County, England, where the land is very fertile, producing abundant crops, lush grasslands, and forage. Progressive farmers there needed a large sheep capable of eating all of that that vegetable matter that was being produced. So they needed a large sheep capable of converting ample supplies of feed into wool and meat. The Hampshire sheep was kind of the popular sheep at the time in the county neighboring to Oxford. And that was it is a large, hardy, barefaced breed that was at that time undergoing kind of an improvement program throughout that county by adding in or careful breeding with addition of Southdown bloodlines. Oxford farmers felt that this sheep wasn't large enough to fully utilize the feeds available in their region, but while its wool quality was good, the fleece size was small. So they looked around a little more, and over in Cotswold County, they were producing a massive long wool breed, the Cotswold. And so they began experimenting with deliberate crosses between the Hampshire Southdown mix and the Cotswold breed that from Cotswold. And so to take advantage of the hardiness and the wool quality of the Cotswold. Now, Cotswolds are a long wool luster breed. Their fleece is very similar to mohair. So it's very different from the Hampshire and Shropshire and Southdown fleeces, but these producers were interested to see what would happen when they crossed those two very different kinds of sheep, what would happen to the fleece, as well as the body size. The cross resulted in a new sheep ideally suited to the Oxford area. And by 1850, little additional crossbreeding was needed. They had produced several generations of lambs and ewes within those 20 years to focus on establishing the Oxford breed type within, by breeding selectively within the generations that they had produced, which we've talked about that in other segments, how you can very quickly develop a new sheep breed. And if your breed produces offspring prodigiously, you can very quickly have large enough flocks to be for lack of a better word, inbreeding, to strengthen the new breed, that the genetics of the new breed that you've come up with, rather than continuing to crossbreed from outside that kind of quarantined group of sheep. Let's see. The breed was standardized through the 1850s, much of that breeding taking place in the area of Witney in Western Oxfordshire, which led to the choice of the breed name during the 1960s. The Oxford was recognized as a true and distinct breed at the Royal Agricultural Society show in 1862. I'm gonna change pictures just for entertainment. Let's see. Here's well, here's an older photo of, I think this photo is a comparison. Let me see. Oh, this is the top one is a ram and the bottom ones are the ewes. So you can see that the ram has like a deeper body, and it's just a bigger, bulkier head, a bulkier muzzle, and the body itself is just very blocky. The ewes are rounder, and that's probably beneficial for both birthing lambs and digesting food to provide for the lambs as they're gestating. That they have that larger, rounder stomach to process their food. And then here, stop share. I'm trying to get out of this picture, but hopefully it will just, it's just taking a moment. Let's see. Where was I? Oh, here we go. The Oxford achieved widespread success through the middle of the 1800s, producing outstanding sheep for mutton and wool. And if you remember some of our earlier discussions about the Industrial Revolution, this was the period of time when industrialization was taking place very quickly. People were gravitating toward the cities from rural environments to work in factories, especially in the textile industry, which was exploding during this time. So not only was there a greater need for wool, worldwide, but all of these people that used to live in rural environments and produce their own clothing and food at home were now city dwellers that went to work in a factory every day. And so they had to begin purchasing their clothing and food. And so, a market or a commercial market developed there as well. So with the expansion of transportation options, exportation was, exploding as well. So there was just a huge stress and demand on the wool industry, the textile industry, and the food industry all at the same time from many directions. People were spreading out all over the globe and wanting to take animals with them to provide and establish economies in those places. And the economy of the moment was the wool industry, the textile industry, and with the advent of the ability to refrigerate meat, the meat industry. So these large, highly productive animals were in huge demand. Purebred flocks were established throughout Britain and Ireland, with large numbers of sheep exported to the USA, Canada, Germany, Denmark, Russia, and Argentina. the Oxford Downs Sheep Breeders Association was established in 1889, and in that same year began the first flock book, or the first flock book was published to record the pedigrees of the breed. The reputation of the Oxford Down grew, and for the first half of the 20th century, it was one of the most popular crossing sires for lamb and mutton production. Upwards of 1,000 rams were penned annually at the Kelsey. So this is a breed that has had a real up and down kind of popularity of, and that has influenced the number of sheep, the number of Oxfords at different times. And I actually found that, you know, there was directly conflicting information about breed numbers on one site than the other. And both saying like, the sheep were counted in 2021 and this was the number. So I'm going to tell you what that is in a minute. But just in general, this sheep was wildly popular in the middle of the 1800s because it was such a productive breed. And there was such a great, I don't know if you heard me talking about the Industrial Revolution part of it. You did?
Yeah.
So there was such a great need for it. And this sheep met the mark in terms of working for the farmer to keep the fields clean and grazed and dispense of the after crops on agricultural land, and then to produce tons of wool, tons of meat, and really good, fast-growing lambs, and very sturdy and easy to manage at the same time. You just couldn't ask for more. And then there was a push in the after the first third of the 1900s to modify all sheep breeds really to favor the more compact, smaller animals, but still produce animals that were very productive. And I think, well, it wasn't stated anywhere, I got to thinking about this, and it made a lot of sense that in early days, when you're driving sheep on foot to places, larger sheep that can tolerate those kind of journeys are very good. They're strong and able to be moved from place to place and recover very quickly. But once we had railroads and shipping, increased, moving animals from one place to another really took on a different, different things had to be considered. So it might be more efficient to move larger numbers of smaller animals than to move smaller numbers of larger animals that weigh a lot. So I imagine in some ways industrialization and the changes in transportation played a part in that desire for more compact animals. Otherwise, I don't know. I guess they're just easier to handle just overall, even in large commercial instances. So the breed was modified during the middle third of the 1900s to have a lower weight, a smaller body, and still be producing lots of meat and wool. But those modifications actually caused the sheep to fall out of favor, the Oxford to fall out of favor in favor of other breeds, I imagine. Though a small group of breeders in the Midlands and Yorkshire, Northumberland, the borders of Scotland and Aberdeenshire maintain their Oxford flocks, probably because they like them. And through that period of disfavor. And so when agriculture was ready to enjoy a revival of the breed, there were farms and flocks available to do that, which was very lucky because every breed doesn't fare as well in terms of those kind of up and down, popularity. As you know, some breeds are extinct now, or very, very rare, or endangered. And fortunately, Oxfords are not on that list of breeds. So let's see. Currently, in the 21st century, it has been an endangered breed in the UK and is listed as at risk on the watch list of the Rare Breed Survival Trust. A population, now this is like literally in direct, it's directly counter to what is stated on the Oxford Down Breeders Association website, which I will also tell you. So in some places you're going to find that it is on the watch list of the Rare Breed Survival Trust, with a population of just over 1,000 head reported in 2021. Outside the UK, it is presently distributed in 10 different European countries, Canada and the USA, and the global population is estimated to be around 20,000 heads. So its international conservation status is not at risk. Now on the British Sheep Breeders Association website, they state that today the breed continues to fulfill a specialist role as a terminal sire breed, and approximately 110 registered flocks are listed in the Breed Association flock book, with a total of 1,600 pedigree breeding ewes put to the ram or bred annually, plus 500 ewe lambs retained as replacements. So those numbers are very much at odds with the numbers on the Rare Breed Survival Trust, and they're both supposedly current. So I don't know how that is possible, but I'm just reporting here. Oxford Down populations can also be found in the USA, Canada, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Norway, the Netherlands, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and New Zealand. Oxford type populations exist in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Ukraine, and Russia. So it continues to be a very, very popular breed. Now, going back to the mid 1800s, I'm going to talk about how the Oxford got to the USA and its kind of history here, which is pretty deeply documented on the American Sheep Breeders Association site. So the qualities of the new Oxford breed, when it was a new breed, drew the attention of American importers, and the first Oxfords were brought to North America in 1846. Importations continued to be made until 1900, and to a limited extent afterward. The American Oxford Down Record Association was founded in 1882 in Xenia, Ohio. Oxfords imported prior to 1900 were very large, rectangular, and nearly black in color, with only a small amount of wool on the head and legs. Mature rams commonly weighed over 400 pounds. And at this point, the breed was not as full-bodied or bulky in the hindquarters as it would develop or evolve into being. So fleece weight at the time, and these were, again, the original Oxford sheep, fleece weight was between 12 and 20 pounds per year. Some individuals with coarse or loose fleeces, which is very different than the fleece of the later generations of this sheep, and definitely different than the fleece of today. So the fleeces were more in appearance, they were coarser and more like the hill breeds, with like if you remember, let me think, the Finn sheep and the Cheviot sheep, they have kind of this, and even the Gotland actually kind of have this wavy, loose fleece. It's not exactly like in ringlets like a mohair or a Cotswold, or the Wensleydale, but it's fluffy, but it's a straighter lock of wool. And that was the original Oxford fleece type. The staple length would have been, somewhere between 3 and 6 inches, or 3 and 5 inches. And that has changed over time, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the original importation of Oxfords was this kind of older, the original, the OG Oxford. Between 1900 and 1930, U.S. breeders continued to maintain those characteristics while improving the fleece quality and the muscling of the animals. The breed quickly spread into Eastern Canada, the Great Lakes states, and the Corn Belt states. Farm flock owners looked to the massive Oxford rams for crossing on their native ewes to improve growth rate and carcass quality of the lambs. The result was a rapid, efficient growth to heavier weights without becoming overly fat. The Oxford Cross ewe was valued for heavy milking, twinning ability, docile disposition, heavy shearing, and overall size and large structure. And again, that large structure, especially toward the back of the animal, is very beneficial for easy birthing. And easy birthing generally leads to a better prognosis for lambs as they grow. So that's all really good if you're producing sheep for commercial purposes. Oxfords were used successfully by a number of Western commercial producers to cross on fine wool ewes, but on the range, Oxfords don't really enjoy the same popularity that they do in the farm flock regions of the country, the Eastern United States and the Midwest. So they really do thrive best in smaller holdings where the animals are managed closer to home, closer to the barn. They are a sturdy, tolerant sheep, but they really can't be. They really don't do well if they're let loose on a range for months and months at a time without being kind of checked on and managed. I imagine partly because just that lumbering size isn't really conducive to range conditions. They can get stuck or break a limb or get attacked by animals so much more easily if they can't move around quickly, if they're not agile and limber and kind of small boned to, just helps them stay out of trouble, I imagine. I'm not a sheep herder, so I don't know, but I would just guess. Within the United States, Oxfords expanded in number well into the 1900s, despite strong competition from Shropshires and Hampshires. In the early 1900s, Oxfords were the third largest breed of sheep registered in the United States. At this point, the breed had changed very little since its early importation. The color of the fleece had been lightened a little bit to include a white spot on the nose in some flocks. And, you know, overall, the overall animal size was slightly smaller, but also more heavily muscled. And then during the 1930s, a movement developed in the United States and elsewhere as well toward this more compact, round type of sheep. The goal was to produce a fattened market lamb at 80 to 85 pounds, which is considerably smaller than the 200 to 300 pound, average of the old Oxford type. Educators, breeders associations, and breeders and their associations and packers put their efforts toward changing the type of all breeds. So this wasn't just an Oxford thing. It was really just an industry-wide push to reduce the overall size of the animal. And just like many other industries with equally universal changes, it was all in on all levels of the industry. So everyone from, colleges that were teaching agriculture and veterinary science to the butchers and packers of the final product meat were kind of desiring this change. Oxford sired lambs were widely criticized for being too large, too growthy, which means they were too fast growing, and failing to carry enough fat at the desired market weight. A strong non-uniform effort took place among Oxford breeders to reduce the size of the conformation to the type proposed by the industry leaders at that time. Suddenly, the Oxford selection was focused on smaller, short-legged, short-bodied, and less rectangular animals with more compact offspring. I'm going to bring up a photo of such sheep. And you can see here in this photo that these are sheep that are at a judging. They're in a show ring. And you can see that they're much smaller and definitely not as square. So you see here the rounder, shorter body, still with really hefty hindquarters, and the chest area as well, still pretty hefty, but more bigger in the width and not so much in the length and the depth. And they're definitely not as tall. I mean, these don't even come up to the waist height of the judges in this case. The movement towards small sheep with more wool covering continued through the 1940s and reached its peak in the late 1950s. Much has been said for and against this trend, from the big, almost black Oxfords originally imported from Europe and the UK to this day. Breeders of that time are strongly criticized for reducing the stock of the Oxford while developing an earlier maturing, heavier muscled sheep. But this was the trend in all breeds and the path of least resistance. So, people who raise animals, especially the smaller farms with smaller flocks, their complete livelihood is at the mercy of these kinds of trends. So they are often desperate to catch up to whatever, wherever the trend is taking their particular product, whether it's a crop or an animal. They usually feel a lot of pressure to keep up, just to, keep their farms going. The problem with this one is that the change in the breed was really drastic, and if it hadn't been carried too far, the breed would have been actually improved with this change. But what happened was that the proposed changes produced results that were not uniformly positive. So the size reduction was accompanied by a parallel action to change the fleece quality to the fleece color to a light gray or white. As we've seen with many other breeds, this was a desire of the commercial textile industry, and in some cases almost eliminated colored fiber, and did eliminate colored fiber from some breeds, including the Oxford is a victim of that. Today, I actually didn't find reports of any considerable sources of colored Oxford fiber, except as you see like on the legs of these animals. But Oxford is not produced in colors today. It is a white sheep as it stands now. The entire breeding program of some flocks was based on the goal of lightening the face coloring. Outstanding quality animals were rejected by breeders and judges for being too dark or too big, and the strategy and this strategy kind of caused a controversy from the moment it was instigated. So unfortunately, the changes, the very changes that they were trying to produce caused a drop in the popularity of this animal. And as with many breeds, the show ring was kind of dictating the characteristics of the animal rather than the positive economic and practical qualities that the breed offered. So that dictated the type for the future, unfortunately. To its credit, the Oxford breed remained a useful sheep throughout that period. A lesser breed might have disappeared entirely, but because its siring abilities for strengthening the offspring of other breeds was valuable, some flocks were maintained, although not in the old way. So by the late 1950s, what the breeders ended up with were animals that were not what they used to be and not as good as they were supposed to be. And fortunately, the genetics, there were still flocks with genetics that were valuable for a real improvement, a true improvement in the breed. Let's see. So from the 1950s through the 1970s, a new generation of livestock producers began to kind of question the theories of the previous 20 to 30 years. They conducted carcass cutout tests, production tests, and feed efficiency tests, and found that the compact market lamb actually yielded a much higher percentage of fat and less eating meat than the consumer ever really wanted. In addition, they were inefficient to breed, and they could not achieve heavier weights for market without producing excess fat. So this compact, the whole idea was kind of silly, like, let's produce a smaller sheep that produced more meat and wool. And just not, even when you say it out loud, it doesn't sound like it would make sense. And it didn't. They were inefficient to breed, and breeding for that lamb type was also less efficient and less productive than the larger frame sheep. So even in terms of producing offspring, they were not what was hoped. So this kind of fresh generation of breeders put a call out for purebred breeders to produce a larger, more productive sheep and lambs that were a little bit more like the original Oxfords, capable of reaching heavier weight quickly and efficiently, with the emphasis placed on a long body and a thick hindquarter and minimum fat. So now, the Oxford breed retained their original genetics to a greater extent than many other breeds, which is probably one of the reasons that even though the compact type was a goal, it never really was reached, and it never was really popular with this breed, because the ability to change the genetics just wasn't happening fast enough for the trend that was going on. So the one thing they had achieved was to improve the muscling in the back end of the sheep. So this breed was always naturally more lean, and that quality, along with the longer and thicker body, placed the breed a little bit better going forward, coming out of the trend of the 1930s. The Oxford was a little bit more ahead of other breeds in being able to recover kind of its original standing. Oxford sired lambs began excelling in carcass shows and evaluation tests, and demand sparked for the leading Oxford breeders to regain the traditional large breed size. Fortunately, not all breeders had gone too far into the trend for the compact sheep. Some were so against the downsize of the breed that they closed their flocks and stayed out of the show ring entirely. And suddenly those individual flocks were sought after for the purpose of regenerating the breed. Those very large individual animals could be used to improve or re-improve the breed from the compact type to a larger scale animal. Excuse me. And then one of the other things that they did was to import several from, they began to import Scottish Oxford bloodlines to help the process of regaining the genetics of the breed. So in the early 1970s, several progressive breeders became so concerned about the decreasing gene pool of the real Oxfords that they began to import Scottish Oxfords to broaden their genetic pool. And the Canadian government actually imported several pregnant Oxford ewes from different genetic lines into Eastern Canada from Scotland. Some very high quality offspring were born in quarantine in Canada from those ewes. And then several females of those offspring were dispersed into Oxford flocks in Ontario and Quebec. I'm going to close this down and show you a photo of a mama and a little lamb. There they are. So this is a modern kind of what we end up with after some of these ups and downs in the actual conformation of the animal. This is the Oxford as it stands today. This is a U, so it's smaller, but it's got a little more of that rectangular shape. The fleece is, this one, the fleece looks a little bit longer. I don't know if you noticed on the previous photo had a very short fleece that was very, very tightly compact. This one kind of has a mixed, it's compact, but it has some looseness to it where some of the locks are starting to separate a little bit. You can see a little bit of that. And the little lamb has kind of a long-legged look, but it definitely has a more rectangular body. It's lean and long rather than round and chubby. And you can, because its fleece hasn't grown out yet, you can see a little bit more of the shape of its body. So once they began importing some Scottish Oxford blood, and began breeding in Canada, a lot of United States breeders were anxious to get their hands on some of these improved modern Oxfords. So some of that importation, or some of the offspring of that importation and mating of Canadian and Scotland Oxfords, ended up in Kentucky, Illinois, Michigan, and Iowa from the late 70s into the 1980s. And breeders were, at that point, were very quick to recognize the genetic potential of these kind of improved Oxfords from the North. So they began using those lines in their breeding programs and recognized a tremendous genetic punch to their flocks. Several breeders began infusing Scottish bloodlines on both the male, the sire side, and the dam side of their breeding program, producing a significant impact on the size and the desired structural qualities of the American Oxfords. By 1975, an Oxford yearling in Kentucky, sired by a Scottish ram bred from that Canadian importation, was named the Supreme Champion ewe at the prestigious North American International Show. And in 1981, an Oxford ram named the Executive earned the Supreme Champion Ram of the same show, as well as the Supreme Champion Sheep of the entire show. So very quickly in the 1970s and into the early 80s, the breed was able to regain a lot of its original prestige, for one thing, but also strong genetic characteristics and quality commercial characteristics as well. Therefore, they spread very quickly during the 1980s and into the 1990s with major increases in registrations in the Breeding Association and record prices at the National Oxford Sale shows. And those record prices were broken over and over again as the decade kind of proceeded. The breed trend in popularity began on the West Coast in the 1970s and really took off during the 80s and 90s, expanding into the southern and eastern states. Oxford, and that makes sense because southern and southern and eastern states are a little bit wetter. They have more rainfall, very lush vegetation in many areas that, farmers can hardly stay on top of, and huge agricultural production in some of those states. So this is a really great sheep for a farm to run if they need help managing the land, as well as wanting to produce commercial products from the sheep themselves. So able to convert what's literally laying around in the fields into a productive and lucrative market product. Let's see. Oxford market lambs were increasingly popular for their overall quality, style, and eye appeal. I love the way that they're spoken about. A new generation of Oxford breeders was challenging the big established names in the commercial sheep business, and many producers founded Oxford flocks as a primary breed, or were picking them up as a second breed. Oxfords were also popular for youth programs like 4-H and FFA and those kind of programs for very young farmers that help train them and educate them in farm management and industry understanding and the understanding of the circuit and all of that. There arose a renewed sense of competition and a desire to advertise and promote the breed among producers. The national sale was moved to Springfield, Illinois during the 1990s, I think. And that was a really good move because multiple breeds were able to show at this point and in this sale, and it was by moving to Springfield, they were closer to a lot of different accessible transportation options. So many more buyers and sellers of sheep and showmen were able to get to this sale. And so, with more producers to choose from and more buyers to choose from, the Oxford market really expanded, and transportation in and out of the market was much more possible. So they were competing very well in the show ring at that time, and business was kind of exploding, which brought on some of its own troubles. Business exploding can become quickly overwhelming for people, especially the farm flock owners who were not running huge commercial operations, but managing kind of smaller operations and were a lot more hands-on. And so trying to produce, the amount of sheep that needed to be produced meant that something had to give way, and something needed to be shortchanged. And with what happened was that they started cutting corners on promotion of their breed, and so new interest from new breeders wasn't being gained because new breeders weren't finding out about this breed. As the older breeders died or retired or lost interest, that's kind of where the breed is at right now in the US, is that the new millennium brings a kind of a challenge to develop new, enthusiastic, and committed Oxford breeders, and to get the word out to them that, how great a sheep this is. So right now, the efforts of the US Association is to produce, bring people in, to get them interested, to make more, to create Oxford breeding opportunities, to breed more Oxford sheep and generate more product through advertising, promotions, and creative ideas. That said, the Oxford is not at this point in the United States in any way like a rare breed. It's not overwhelmingly common, but it's also not endangered or short on. We're not short on Oxfords. So now I'm going to talk about the wool a little bit, because that's really our main concern and what you're working with now. Hopefully most of you are at the point where you're using your white wool. Currently, the state of the Oxford fleece is that it should be a compact, uniform fleece with a good staple length, meaning in this case, somewhere between 1.5 and 5 inches, which is a really broad range. But most concurrence of the new Oxford fleece is that it's very short, about 2 inches, under 3 inches, and very, very dense. And I'm going to go back to, I don't have a good photo of the fleece itself. I might not be able to go back actually from this photo. But what they say about it is that you're not, when you put your hand into the fleece, you're not able to close your hand around the wool. It's so dense and thick that it actually feels like a substance more than like a fleece. It feels more like a spongy thing than a hair. So you can't really close your hand and grab like locks of wool. The fleece is white with no black fibers allowed, and with sufficient greasiness to keep it in good condition. The fleece should weigh 10 to 12 pounds for a year's clip. The wool is a down type wool. So I'm going to talk about the down types kind of as a group, which is the way I was able to gather the most information about that would relate specifically to this wool. In other words, all the information out there that I was able to find kind of grouped Oxford with all the other down breeds and talked about it as a class of wool. The true down breeds, again, are called downs because they originated in southeastern England. Some of the hill breeds are included in that category because of their fleece similarities. The down and down type breeds include Dorset, Dorset Down, Horn Dorset, Clune Forest, Shropshire, Suffolk, Hampshire, and Welsh Mountain, as well as the Oxford. The length of the staple is even shorter than many fine wools, less than 4 inches in 1 year's growth. The robust crimp is what gives these woolens their unique characteristics and abilities. The fibers of the down breeds have crimp in several directions, including the spiraling direction. So it's, when you look at a lock of wool, it looks very disorganized, and none of it like falls into a strict zigzag or a strict spiral or a curve. Okay, so the locks don't have an organized crimp pattern, and the fibers grow in every direction. The fiber is a chalk type with a low luster or matte appearance, as opposed to a luster wool. And the micron count is 24 to 34, which is really just outside of the merino range. So that said, there are specific breeds within the down class that are more coarse. But it's still fairly fine and soft. Down type wool has unique properties of resilience due to the shape and springiness of its crimp. So the wool is resilient, elastic, very washable, and a good insulator, because that chaotic arrangement of fibers is one that encapsulates more air, and air provides insulation. So these type of wools are really good for warm clothing, accessories like mittens, hats, scarves, and sweaters, and things that need to take a lot of wear, like socks, are wonderful from this kind of wool. And coupled with its resistance to felting, it really makes for a very washable sock wool. It's also really great for batting and for mattress pads and comforters and quilts, because that springiness provides a little bit more cushioning, and also a better ability to aerate, to be washed and dried, and not to harbor moisture within the piece that you're using for batting. So down wools are naturally very resistant to felting and generally considered naturally super washable. So they require not much more than a reasonable amount of care in washing, although they can be needle felted if desired. That said, it's always a good idea to experiment with your washing procedure and not just toss something in the wash because, we heard on the internet that it's washable. They don't say machine washable, they just say washable. So I'm assuming that you still need to be very careful about throwing, your woolen socks into the washing machine, that you can do it on a hand wash cycle when you put your socks in a mesh bag and put it on like a hand wash or a very delicate cycle. But again, even with those kind of cycles, experimenting is a really good idea. So within this down class of fiber, there is a broad range of fineness between different breeds. Most fall into the middle range of softness, but several produce very fine fleece. And the lamb's wool is often very fine and very soft. So even in an animal that's producing like a yearling or a 2-year-old ewe that's producing a micron count of 25 to 35, or maybe even a little higher, the lamb's wool from that ewe could be more like 20 to 25. So definitely within the merino range, and definitely wool that you might be more, that might be more desirable as a next to the skin kind of wool. Let's see. The fineness of all sheep really can be due to a variety of factors. So sampling and swatching. Sampling if you're spinning, swatching if you're knitting is really important, just to make sure that you're going to get what you expect from the yarn or from the fiber. I'm going to talk a little bit, because I know we have some spinners in the group. A little bit, I found some information in a blog post from Beth Smith, who owns a spinning loft, and she spins a wide range of fibers and talks about them on her blog. And so she covered the down breeds in a really nice blog post. And so I pulled some highlights for those who do spinning. I know Jean is enthusiastic about spinning and often asks questions about that, and Gika as well. So The preparation of the down fibers for spinning usually depends on the fiber length. The best method is usually hand carding or drum carding because the fibers are so short. But for fleeces with a staple length greater than 3 inches, combing is a possible and doable and a great option for the fiber. Spinning the fiber worsted style will provide all the same benefits of worsted spun wool, but the yarn will still look and behave as if the wool had been carded and spun long draw because of that chaotic fiber growth pattern. So you can comb the fiber and smooth it somewhat and spin it worsted and smooth it a little bit more, but it's still going to retain that really springy mix of different fiber shapes. And so in a way, you're getting the best of both worlds. Once you're getting an airy yarn due to the shapes of the fibers, but you're getting a stronger yarn due to the preparation and spinning style that if you do choose to spin a worsted style. So you can add to the durability of that fiber by going with a worsted prep and a worsted spinning technique. And of course you can also use a woolen spinning technique if you like, and you'll get an even airier, fuzzier yarn by doing that. And another thing to think about when spinning with this fiber, when you spin it worsted, when you prep it and spin it worsted style, you're gonna get that smoother yarn with a little bit more drape to it and a little bit more resilience. But as soon as you wash it, you're going to need to expect some shrinkage in that yarn, because as soon as you wash it, the shape of the fibers is going to want to go back to the memory of the original fiber. It's going to want to spring back kind of. You will not lose the benefits of the worsted spinning, but you'll have, one of the characteristics of a woolen spun yarn in that it will shrink a little bit more than other worsted yarns that you might spin. So just something to keep in mind as a spinner, that if you're planning for a project and you need a certain amount of yardage, you do need to plan for some shrinkage with this fiber. And that's all I have on that today. Any questions, or anybody want to say anything?
Thanks for the spinning information. That was fun.
You're welcome.
That was good.
I saw that Susan popped up. I don't know. Susan, were you here the whole time, or did you pop in late, or?
I'm here the whole time.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure you heard about the numbers and stuff that.
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really interesting that I literally found information at odds with itself, depending on where I read it. So take that for what it's worth. I'm sure with more digging and more time, I might be able to straighten out the kind of confusion that's out there. But, with the time I had, I wasn't able to track that down. Donna. Oh, go ahead, Susan.
I was just going to say, it's not inconceivable when you hear about what this breed has gone through.
Exactly.
To see that there'd be confusion like that, for sure.
Well, right. And another thing is that places like the conservancies and the Rare Breed Trust are counting on information from the associations that are coming from their flock books, from the genetic pedigrees of these animals. Well, if you close your flock in order to preserve the old sheep, you're not in the flock book. Like, there's so much going on around this breed that,
Right.
so many, in some places, some numbers might not even be getting counted. I just can't imagine that it's all in a very organized state at this point. Donna?
My question is about the down breeds.
Uh-huh.
Is down being used as a geographical location
Yes.
and nothing to do with the fiber itself?
Nope, nothing to do with fiber.
Geography.
Correct. It has no relationship to like a double coated animal that has a downy underlayer where the like llama down or you know, cashmere is really the cashmere fiber as we know it is a down product of the coat. No, literally it means down in southern England is
Okay.
where the sheep come from. So, but it does include, and even more confusing, the down breeds include some hill breeds because the fiber characteristics are similar. And, you know, just chalk that up to many kind of incongruent things about the sheep, about sheep in general and the history of sheep in general, having evolved as a group through millennia of different human experiences that influence their the way we talk about them and the way we raise them and all of that. Lindy?
Yeah, while you were throwing off, so some of us had a question about, you talked about how the fibers could be corkscrew or spiral, and we were trying to figure out if that was just a degree of how corkscrewed it was to be more of a spiral, or if there's some actual difference between
I
them.
don't think I said corkscrew or spiral. Spiral is corkscrew, that they're the same thing.
That's what we thought,
But
yeah.
crimp, I said crimped or spiral, so it could be curled. Like a curled lock isn't the same as a corkscrew or spiral lock.
Right.
So
Okay.
that helical lock is a unique characteristic of not very many breeds, and the down breeds inclusive, and some hill breeds. A curling lock is not the same thing. A curling lock is a lock that's more S-shaped. And if you think about it, that's just a very loose version of the Z-shaped crimp that you see in like a merino or a cormo fleece. The S shape is just a very loose version of that you see in long wool breeds that don't have a lot of springy crimp.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah, that
You're
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Audrey? Where'd she go? Did she
There.
mute herself?
Mute. I'm noticing the two different grays, how you say sometimes grays are more blue and more brown. And I'm on the whatever you, this is C3 and I'm using, but I'm using yarn D. It's very confusing sometimes.
Yes.
But the difference between the Shetland and the Frisian mix, the colors when separated by that Wensleydale, the Shetland looks almost blue. I mean, it's really different looking.
Yeah, the Frisian looks almost blue. Yeah.
The Frisian is the one that's almost blue?
Yeah, and the one you're using right now is the Shetland. So
So
that was yarn C. I think, can you hold it up again? But I'm pretty sure you have it. You're using it correctly. Yeah, you're using the more brown of the two. That's the Shetland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And don't forget that Shetland has a much more varied range of grays. So that's one of the warmer ones. But they do produce a steel blue gray as well. But
Well,
the one that
made it
the one that
when you talk about your grays.
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I can't tell the difference, but boy, this
Now
time.
you can.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. In terms of gray and sheep, gray is anything that's not white and not black. So it, with some breeds that they only get brown grays, but some breeds actually do produce those steel blue grays as well as browns. And so it can be really confusing. Like the Romney produces all the grays and all the browns. So one thing they don't really produce is a middle gray brown like the Shetland does. Shetland produces browns and grays and gray browns. And if you look at our stone soup colors, they are warmer grays, but not as brown as the browns and not as blue gray as the blue grays. So they are a cool brown, like a taupe. That's why I say when you come, anyone who's been to our shop walks in, it's like, or to a show and sees like the wall of colors. There's such a variety. There's, you can always find something that suits you well in the natural range.
Yeah, it's just nice for those of us who are not so color educated, as an artist would be, I'm seeing it now, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Anybody else want to say something or see something?
I just thought
Feel
that the
sorry
lamb
for-
was very stylish. The one with the cute ears at the end there.
I
Very
know,
stylish.
the little lammy.
Yeah, with
I
the
like it.
ears.
Speaking of stylishness, I like your haircut. I noticed it's much
Thank
shorter.
you. It is. It's because the cursing got to be bad. It was hanging in my face, driving me crazy.
Yeah.
The headset just was not conducive to what she had decided I needed on my head. And I finally just went in and said, look, you need to do this because it's the way my life works. She was like, okay. But it's going to be cute once they get all the product out. That's the tricky part.
Yeah, I hear you. So voting is underway for the naming of the shawl. I'm going to show it again for anybody who might not have been here at the start, so that it can inspire you to think of names and vote. But this is the blocked shawl. You can see how big it is.
So
Really?
pretty.
Yeah, it's
It's
really pretty.
nice.
And
And the holes are really great once they get blocked out.
yeah, they're very winky. And you can also see too how light the fabric is. It's very sheer. Even those 3-plies are semi-sheer kind of, and very drapey. It's got nice fluid. It's not stiff at all. It's really, really nice.
Once the Pico Fairy finishes the picos, I'll have a very nice shawl.
And can we submit more than one
Absolutely.
name? Okay,
Absolutely.
if we were limited to one.
Yeah. And so I guess Michelle will make up a form for this week's email that you can click on the link to place your votes. And then I guess next Saturday is our last day. Because then we have to get ready for the Rhinebeck.
My yarn hasn't come.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
no.
Well, it's the post office, I'm sure. It's been on its way now for 5 days.
I bet it has.
Yeah.
In some places, the post office is just very slow.
Well,
Postal-
sometimes it's really fast, but LA is big. And sometimes my packages go to 3 different LA distribution points. And I can't figure out why, because other times they come straight to me, it's just amazing. I guess it's the guy who's asleep at 3 a.m. who can't figure it out.
Well, we live in a really small place and a relatively less populated state. And as Elizabeth can attest to, sometimes her packages, which are she only lives 3 hours from here, 3.5 hours. Sometimes her packages go to Cleveland, Toledo, and Cincinnati on their way from Canton to Dayton. So that's 5 cities that the package goes to. You know, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I
And-
always
and
say
then-
it's
and
gone
then-
on a
and then-
walkabout.
And then
Yeah.
sometimes they also go to Pennsylvania or Kentucky. You know?
Hey,
I
I've
had one
had
go to Pennsylvania once.
packages recently, one of which arrived at the St. Paul Post Office and then was sent from St. Paul to, I think, Memphis, Tennessee, where it then wended its way through several states before it got back to St. Paul. And the second one arrived at the St. Paul Post Office, the main distribution center, and went from here to Stillwater, which is a small suburban town, before it came back to St. Paul, and then it went to my post office. Now
Wow.
that's clearly someone asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Well, Dee Dee, I think you'll appreciate this. In Hunter's family, there was a letter that his grandmother addressed to his grandfather, and it just said, Leo Black, Los Angeles, California. And that was it.
Wow.
That was a different age.
Yes, it
Yeah.
was. It was.
Yeah,
And it's there.
a lot of change in
Oh, yeah.
about 100 years, I guess. So
Even as a kid, I could send a letter to my grandmother with just her name and the name of the very small town she lives in, but that's because her sister was the postmistress.
Oh.
That does help. Our
I was talking
mail
to my-
delivery person is training a new mail delivery person, and the new guy doesn't seem to quite follow the concept. And so we've had pretty much all of our neighbors just do this mail exchange thing. Like we just keep bringing mail to each other, like all of us. It's gotten sort of funny, and we actually have thought about maybe we should just hang out and have a mail like exchange and drinks because it seems like a daily thing.
Kind of
Like,
like a
and-
secret Santa.
We all have large numbers on our houses to make sure that people know who to deliver things to, and poor guy, he can't seem to figure it out. It seems like being able to recognize numbers would be a prerequisite for a postman.
Yeah, I thought you had to take a pretty stringent test on those things to get into the post office.
Perhaps
maybe-
Chat GPT.
Maybe that's
took it
gone
for
by the
him.
wayside.
I think
Think
it's the way, I think it's the way they sort it. And if it's in the packet, it's in the bundle that's been sorted in a certain way. They don't look at the stuff when they're out delivering. At least my guys don't. I have one woman who is really, really good. And I really appreciate when she delivers my mail because I know it won't be wrong.
We used to have a good guy. We've had a number of other people since then.
Mm.
And quick question, I haven't had a chance to listen to the Wool School on Yarn C. What was the yarn's name?
The one that Audrey was talking about, the blue gray.
Yeah, Yarn C.
Yeah, that is it's East Frisian and Corriedale blend.
Okay, thank you.
And I was interested to offer that because we had just had the East Frisian and alpaca blend in our barn box, and I was interested to see what you guys thought of the difference between them. You know, like just what your observations might be. I mean, I love the one with the alpaca, and when we bring it back, that's what we're going to get. But I love the color of the one with the Corriedale, and it does have more body and everything. So I was kind of just curious to see what everyone thought.
Thank you.
Love the color.
Yeah, these colors have been very nice.
Yeah, but I mean, we can do that color with alpaca too, because
Yeah.
alpaca is blue gray. So
well, I haven't knit with the barn box one yet, so
oh,
I-
you're in for a treat when you do.
Yeah, I gather that. I have trouble alpaca because I get so hot in it.
Mhm. This
But-
is only, it's only 20% alpaca, so it's
Okay.
not a lot. But it was enough to create a nice strong color in the yarn though, that nice toasty brown.
Yeah,
But that might be a really good choice for socks for Hunter, because the doors or the Frisian wool is very sturdy, and the alpaca also is very sturdy and warm.
yeah.
So it might be something. And
The
when we
one-
bring
The
oh,
one
go ahead.
sweater he wears that I made many decades ago was, you know, I'm forgetting the name of the company that makes those alpaca ones. Just a second. Anyway, we all buy that yarn all the time. And he's had it forever, and it's like never pilled once in
Yeah.
probably 30 years. Yeah. So.
And when we're bringing that yarn.
Is it ultra alpaca or something?
Oh,
Oh,
Morocco,
yeah.
Yeah,
Morocco.
yeah.
Morocco.
We're bringing that yarn back in October with that sock pattern to match the leg warmers. So,
Cool.
and I think we're getting 3 or 4 colors in it, you know, just a small amount, just to see how it goes. And that should be a lot of fun. All right, well, it's 2:35, and if no one has any other questions, I'm gonna close down the chat. Tomorrow is our Barn Box chat at our Wool School for Barn Box at 12 Eastern Time. So, bring your pipes. Just kidding. Bring whatever refreshments you like. and I'll see you then. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.